In this lesson, we're going to continue animating our user interface. So we have the Windows logo. Now we need some icons to pop up around here. So let's actually bring the Windows console into our UI. And we know that the first click happens up here. And I want that to happen to the top left of this logo. So let's scale this down. That looks about right. And we can just check it in the main comp to see if this looks good. That looks pretty good. Maybe I might want to scale this down a little bit more and bring it up a bit, just so we can see a bit more of it. That's good. Okay, now let's grab the Windows console and put it into a new comp and call this Windows Console Icons. And the reason we add the icons in here as opposed to in the UI is just so that we don't mess it up. We don't get too many layers in here, because this is where we're going to be assembling all our compositions, and if we chucked everything in here, like all the little icons and all their little rims, it's just going to muddy it up. So we organize ourselves as best as possible, and we're going to thank ourselves later. So we need to make this bigger because the icons won't fit in this small comp. So with the lock aspect ratio, let's go 1400 and see if that's big enough. That would appear to be. And what we want to do is create some spokes. So spoke, Control Y to create a new solid and call it spoke. Make it 10 wide, 600 high. And because we made it 600 high, the anchor point sits at halfway. So we can choose to put that at the very bottom there. And that's looking good. And what we want to do is duplicate this a few times. So we want 7 spokes to create 7 branches for the icons to appear on. Now we need to rotate these, or some of them anyway. So let's set a keyframe for rotation, and let's go to frame 30. And let's start to rotate these. So I set a keyframe for all of them. The first one actually doesn't need to rotate because it starts, well, it starts here, and that's where it needs to be at the end. So this one doesn't need to rotate. I'll just remove the keyframes from there. What we do need to do is rotate the rest, and I'm just going to bring up a calculator. So we have 360 degrees in a circle, and we need 7 spokes to fit inside of it. So 51.42 is the rotation that we need. So 51.42, and I'm going to just select that and copy it, and paste it times 2. Paste it times 3, and so on. There we have it. Now the spokes we don't want in front of the console, we want them behind it. And the reason that they're not showing through is because what I've done is in the Windows console, just duplicated the outer ring and actually deleted the second mask and just filled it with black. So if we turn on transparency, we can see that we don't have transparency in the middle, and that's good because it doesn't reveal the spokes that we have. Now we have the rotation, but what I would also like is the scale as well. So let's select all of these here, hold down Shift S, so keyframe the scale, hit K to jump forward to the next keyframe, set a keyframe for the scale, and then set it to, not negative, but 0. And then let's select all of these keyframes here, and ease and whiz expo in and out. Now this comp here doesn't have motion blur turned on, so let's select everything, apply motion blur, and see, yes, we have the shutter angle as the same, so we can turn on motion blur and see our motion blur. So that's looking nice. Now what we need to do is add in the little icons to these. What I think would be really cool is if the icons themselves actually scaled up as well. So we can see that this scales from the very center. What we want to do is copy the Windows console, just duplicate it and call it icon ring. And in here, we're just going to delete the text, and inside the logo here, we are going to replace this with our different logos. So icon ring, this will be icon ring A. And basically what we just want to do is go through and replace the different icons, and we'll need 7 of these to fit around the 7 spokes of this Windows logo. So we can begin with the USB, so that will be under clips, and I've organized these into different groups. Under Metro icons, we have under Windows the USB Alt, so I'll just simply Alt drag to replace. Now this won't need the same effects, although it will need color correction because we need to make this pitch white on pitch black. And the scale for this, instead of 0 to 30, this will need to be larger. So I'm going to make this 0 to maybe 120, maybe 130, and maybe even bigger. It's okay if it's obviously it's being blown up, but this is actually going to be scaled down. So don't worry if you're going past 100, it won't pixelate because we'll be scaling this down. So we have the USB Alt, and I'll just check the animation. That looks good. So what we want to do is in Windows console icons, grab the under comps, UI comps, icon ring A, and bring that in here. Maybe scale that down to 50%, maybe even less. Let's try 30%, and put that at the very top of where our branch is. So this comp may need to be bigger if you want to extend these a little further. So we can make this bigger. Let's make it 1600, and let's bring this up to, if we set this to add, we'll be able to see the spoke underneath it. So I want this to start at the very end of the branch. Actually, what we'll do is we'll bring the anchor point to here, to the very edge, and then bring that to the edge of the spoke. Zoom in to get accurate, and let's, again, I'm just using Y, which is the pan behind tool shortcut, to move the anchor point, and I'll hit scale here, scale it from 30 to 0, and we'll exponential scale that. And then what I'll do is keyframe this to the actual spoke. So the first spoke is the one that doesn't rotate, so keyframe that. And let's just see, motion blur needs to be turned on. And it doesn't look like 1600 was big enough. Maybe this is too far out, we'll soon find out. But let's just see what our animation looks like. Okay, that looks cool. So let's just go through A, B, C, D, E all the way until we have 7 icons and place them around the table. And again, they'll each need to be parented to the corresponding spoke. So the second icon would need to be parented to this spoke, and the third to this, and so on and so forth. And once that's been done, I haven't actually replaced all the icons yet. I'm just place them around, but you'll see how it looks. It looks pretty good. I think what would look more interesting though is if we, instead of scaling these at the very start, actually had them a bit delayed. I think that looks more interesting. One thing I don't like is the fact that the text is offset by 1 frame each. So I'm going to come into the Windows console and find the 2 bits of text and just make them exactly the same. So we'll put both of them here. So they're offset 2 frames from the logo itself. So they're probably the last things to enlarge. It just looked a bit weird, the fact that they were offset by 1 frame from each other. Even a single frame does make a difference. That looks a lot cleaner. And actually, because there's so much going on, I wouldn't mind if they were just in time with the Windows logo, just because it's a bit distracting otherwise. So let's grab the Windows logo here and make that 2 frames forward. It looked fine when this was the only thing we were looking at and there were only 3 elements, but now that we have all of them, it's just a little bit confusing when lots of different elements have different animation endpoints. It's just better to keep them all the same. And we can add motion blur to all these icons here. And in the next lesson, what we'll do is come in and replace these different icons with some different designs.